Around 600,000 people are protesting in France for a 12th general strike against the country's pension reform. U.S. President Joe Biden is in Dublin after visiting Northern Ireland for the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. Thousands are on the streets in France for a 12th day of nationwide protests against the country's pension reform. In Paris, workers disrupted traffic and garbage collection. And the CGT union says that there's more to come, despite a slight drop in attendance on Thursday.
Je vous le confirme, on va se revoir encore beaucoup et vous allez venir encore beaucoup sur des journées de mobilisation. Donc c'est certainement pas le dernier jour puisque, sauf si Emmanuel Macron ce soir retire la réforme des retraites, là auquel cas ça sera le dernier jour. Et demain on vous invitera pour une grande fête.
Authorities say around 600,000 people took the streets in France, a slight drop from 740,000 people last month. The government's controversial pension reform is set to raise the country's minimum retirement age from 62 to 64.
La foule reste dense ici à Paris pour cet acte 12 de la mobilisation, peut-être moins que lors de certaines des précédentes, mais en tout cas la détermination et même la colère des manifestants, elle reste intacte. Ils réclament le retrait de ce projet de loi qu'ils jugent injuste, injustifié et voté de manière brutale. À la veille d'une décision cruciale du Conseil constitutionnel, les analystes s'accordent pour dire qu'il est peu probable que les sages reviennent sur le recul de l'âge légal de la retraite de 62 à 64 ans. Ils pourraient en revanche censurer certaines dispositions et d'une certaine manière ouvrir la voie à une forme d'apaisement de ce conflit social qui renvoie une grande partie des Français et leur président dos à dos depuis de longues semaines. Cyril Fourneris, Euronews, Paris.
The rain welcomed Joe Biden to Dublin for a presidential trip full of nostalgia. Upon landing, the U.S. president visited a hangar where he was greeted by U.S. embassy officials and their families, many with young children. After having a brief conversation with them, the U.S. president headed for Collingford Castle.
Question their judgment, whether they're right or wrong.
Biden is using the official visit to also soak up the history of his ancestors. 10 of his 16 great-great-grandparents were from Ireland, before moving to the United States during the Great Famine of the 19th century. The visit will conclude on Friday. Before arriving in Dublin, Biden visited Northern Ireland for the 25th anniversary of the signing of the Good Friday Agreement, which put an end to decades of conflict that killed more than 3,000 people. But recent political turmoil has left Northern Ireland without a functioning government, rattling the foundations of the U.S. brokered deal.
Thank you so much. We're moving.
The latest leaked revelations, which have sent US officials at the Pentagon into damage control mode, involve the United Nations Secretary General. They suggest that the White House believes Antonio Guterres is too willing to accommodate Russian interests. The leaked document focuses on the Black Sea grain deal, brokered by the UN and Turkey in July, amid fears of a global food crisis. It suggests that Guterres was willing to promote Russia's ability to export, despite involving sanctioned individuals, as long as Ukraine could get its grain out to the world. Much of the leaked information in the last few days has concerned the Ukraine war. The classified documents range from briefing slides mapping out Ukrainian military positions to international support for the country. It's feared the leaks could affect Ukraine's plan for a counter-offensive.
Я сподіваюся, що наші американські колеги зрозуміють, побачать ті помилки, які були допущені при цьому. З точки зору того, що там було викладено, знову ж це ж ми не все, це те, що нам, на жаль, дає медіа побачить. Є окремі моменти, але з точки зору демотивації нічого не змінюється. Все залишилось, як і є, і нам потрібно відвоювати нашу землю.
Я вірю в Джо Байдену цілковито. Я знаю, що це людина надзвичайно досвідчена і дуже любить Україну. І я впевнена, що все буде ще краще.
The Pentagon has begun its own internal investigation into the source of the leak, but is playing down concerns it could erode US allies' trust in sharing information in the future.
The Russian Ministry of Defense and Wagner Group leader Yevgeny Prigozhin acknowledged each other's roles in the Bakhmut effort. The Russian Ministry of Defense and Prigozhin claimed that Wagner fighters comprise the main effort to take territory and push Ukrainian forces in central Bakhmut, whereas unspecified Russian airborne elements comprise the supporting effort on Wagner's flanks north and south of the town. The Russian forces on the flanks likely aim only to hold the flanks rather than make any significant advances. Now, this array of forces suggests that the Russian Ministry of Defense intends to use the Wagner Group to capture Bakhmut while minimizing casualties among conventional Russian forces, supporting the Institute for the Study of War's prior assessments that the Ministry of Defense seeks to use Wagner forces to capture Bakhmut, then supplant them and take credit for the victory. Russian forces continued ground attacks in and around Bakhmut and did not make any confirmed gains in the city. The Ukrainian General Staff reported that fierce fighting is ongoing within Bakhmut and that Russian troops conducted unsuccessful offensive actions near Khromovo, 3 kilometers west of Bakhmut, and Bogdanivka, 5 kilometers northwest. The Institute for the Study of War says Russian forces are visually confirmed to control at least 76.5% of Bakhmut as of the 11th of April. The think tank says Wagner Group is likely involved in the removal of Ukrainian civilians, including children from Bakhmut, by moving them further into Russian-occupied territory or deporting to the Russian Federation.
A failure to launch. The takeoff of Europe's spacecraft JUICE was postponed at the last possible moment on Thursday because of bad weather conditions. The probe was meant to embark on an 8-year journey to explore Jupiter and its icy moons. Its goal to search for habitable environments and proof of extraterrestrial life. The European Space Agency has rescheduled the launch for Friday. JUICE's historic trip will mark the farthest distance a European spacecraft has ever traveled.
China is keeping up the pressure on Taiwan despite the formal conclusion of its recent military drills. On Wednesday, Taipei tracked 35 flights by Chinese warplanes within the previous 24 hours, as well as 8 Navy vessels in the waters surrounding the self-ruled island. Regional tensions haven't been helped by the US and Philippines holding their own largest ever joint military drills, which China has called a provocation. EU powerhouse Germany has pitched in with calls for calm, clearly blaming Beijing for the inflamed situation.
Rolle spielen. Wir sind sehr besorgt über die Lage in der Straße von Taiwan. Von allen Beteiligten in der Region erwarten wir natürlich, dass sie zu Stabilität und Frieden beitragen. Das gilt ebenso für die Volksrepublik China.
However, French President Emmanuel Macron said on a visit to the Netherlands that he will not join in a verbal escalation of the Taiwan situation.
La France est pour le statu quo à Taïwan. La France soutient la politique d'une seule Chine et la recherche d'un règlement pacifique de la situation. C'est d'ailleurs la position des Européens. Et c'est une position qui, de tout temps, a été compatible avec le rôle d'allié. Mais c'est justement là que j'insiste sur l'importance de l'autonomie stratégique. Être allié ne signifie pas être vassal. Ce n'est pas parce qu'on est allié, qu'on fait des choses ensemble, qu'on décide de faire, qu'on n'a plus le droit de penser tout seul.
China claims Taiwan as its own territory and has a policy of one day bringing the democratic island under its control.
The European path advocated by the French president regarding Taiwan raised controversy. Emmanuel Macron calls on the Union not to show followership towards the United States or China on this issue. For some, these remarks made after his trip to Beijing are dangerous because they could crack European unity and transatlantic solidarity when it comes to Beijing. However, not all observers denounce the strategic autonomy defended by Paris.
President Macron has, for several years now, repeatedly emphasized his view that Europe should develop what he calls strategic autonomy. And I think depending on what you want to see in that concept, different people see different things. For my own part, I don't see that as a threat to U.S. To transatlantic unity at all. I think that there's plenty of people in the United States who would support the idea that Europe should do more to be a strategic actor in its own right, and Europe stepping up to do more, especially in light of the threats, both proximate and global in today's era, would be a good thing.
Dan Baer also points out that certain elements of the analysis presented by the Commission President resonate in Washington. For example, Ursula von der Leyen spoke of the need to preserve the status quo in the Taiwan Strait. However, just after the visit of the European leaders, Beijing conducted a military exercise to encircle the island. In this context, the idea of a European third way seems very difficult because the security of the Union depends on the United States.
We should follow the US as far as in our interests, but it's obvious that our values and our interests are not the same of the US, but are closer to the US than to China. So I don't think that we should just blindly follow the US, but talking about neutrality or equidistance here, I think is not very realistic, because neither our values or our interests are equidistant from Washington and Beijing.
For the EU, the priority remains to keep the channels open with Beijing. The head of European diplomacy was supposed to go to China this week, but his trip has been cancelled due to COVID-19.